There's a certain kind of loneliness that people don't talk about. Not the loneliness of being physically alone, but the loneliness of growing up in a house where everyone is present, yet no one ever sees you. It's the kind of loneliness where a child learns to be quiet, not because they want to, but because no one is listening. It's the loneliness of becoming low maintenance, easy to handle, never causing trouble, never asking for anything, because somewhere along the way, you realized your needs were too much for the people who were supposed to care for you. If this feels uncomfortably familiar, you're not imagining it. This kind of loneliness shapes a person. It follows them into adulthood. It changes who they think they're allowed to be. And today, we're going to talk about why.
What emotional neglect really looks like. Emotional neglect is not loud. It's quiet, subtle, almost invisible from the outside. There are no bruises, no screaming matches, no dramatic moments. Instead, it's the absence of something essential. It's growing up in a home where your sadness made people uncomfortable. Your voice didn't matter. Your feelings were dramatic, sensitive, or annoying. Your achievements were expected, not celebrated. Your pain was inconvenient. Your silence was easier for them than your truth. Children who go through this don't say, "My parents emotionally neglected me." They say things like, "I'm fine. It's whatever. It doesn't matter. I don't want to bother anyone. I'll deal with it myself." Because that's exactly what they learn to do. Emotional neglect teaches a child one core belief: my feelings are mine to carry alone.
The invisible childhood they never got to live. Emotionally neglected children grow up quietly and prematurely. They often become the strong one, the calm one, the mature one, the independent one, long before their mind or heart is ready for those roles. While other kids are learning confidence, they're learning suppression. While other kids are exploring their emotions, they're learning to hide theirs. While other kids are being comforted, they're learning that comfort isn't something they deserve. And so, they find company in their own head. They become daydreamers, overthinkers, observers. Kids who stay up late imagining the kind of love they've never actually felt. And the world praises them for being good, polite, undemanding, never realizing that these qualities aren't personality traits, they're survival tactics.
The adult they grow into, and why it still hurts. The child who grows up unseen becomes the adult who feels invisible, even in a crowded room. This shows up in ways most people never understand. They don't ask for help. They apologize too much. They fall in love too deeply. They stay in relationships too long. They feel guilty for having needs. They break down silently, alone. They crave affection, but don't know how to receive it. They're the kind of adults who give love beautifully, because they know exactly what it feels like to grow up without it. But when someone tries to love them, they flinch. They doubt it. They analyze it. They fear it. Because deep down, a voice still whispers, "Why would anyone care about me when the people who were supposed to didn't?"
The heartbreaking truth they never say out loud. Emotionally neglected children never learned to demand space, so they shrink. They never learned their feelings were valid, so they numb them. They never learned they mattered, so they become the kind of adults who feel disposable. But the saddest part? They don't know how to explain their pain. Because emotional neglect doesn't leave a story, it leaves an emptiness. There are no memories to point to, just the feeling of something that should have been there, but wasn't. A childhood missing softness, missing safety, missing presence, missing connection. And that absence becomes their quiet grief. Healing the inner child who learned to live alone. Healing emotional neglect is not about blaming anyone. It's about finally giving yourself what you were never given: presence, permission, compassion, validation. Here's what healing looks like. 1. Relearning your emotions instead of suppressing them. 2. Allowing yourself to take up space. 3. Letting relationships soften you. 4. Giving your inner child the comfort they never had. 5. Understanding that your needs aren't a burden. They're human. You weren't supposed to raise yourself emotionally. You weren't meant to carry everything alone. And the fact that you survived a childhood without connection says something powerful about you. You didn't grow cold. You didn't grow cruel. You didn't lose your capacity to feel. You just learned to feel quietly. And now, it's finally time to be felt.
Learning the language of your own emotions. Healing from emotional neglect requires something that feels strangely foreign at first: attention toward yourself. When you've spent your entire life minimizing your feelings, the moment you try to acknowledge them, you might feel a tightness in your chest, a hesitation, even guilt. This happens because your nervous system learned long ago that emotions were unsafe. Not because they were dangerous, but because the people around you didn't know how to hold them. So now, as an adult, when sadness rises, your instinct is to swallow it. When anger shows up, you calm it down. When joy appears, you shrink it before anyone notices. This is not your fault. It's conditioning. Relearning your emotions is like learning a language you were never taught, but were expected to speak. It starts slowly. What am I feeling right now? What does my body want me to know? What emotion have I been avoiding? At first, the answers might be vague: a heaviness, a numbness, a pressure behind your ribs. That's okay. You are not doing it wrong. You are waking up parts of yourself that were abandoned. Over time, those blurred emotions gain shape, become names, become familiar, become yours. And the moment you can identify your own emotional reality, you reclaim something powerful. Your internal world becomes a place you can finally inhabit, not escape. Giving yourself permission to be seen. One of the hardest parts of healing is learning that you are allowed to take up space. Not just physical space, emotional space, relational space, human space. For emotionally neglected children, space was something you tiptoed around. You tried to be easy, simple, low maintenance. You mastered the art of being unnoticed because being noticed felt unsafe. But the truth is this: you were never meant to live inside yourself like a quiet tenant who doesn't want to bother the landlord. You were meant to exist fully, with voice, emotion, needs, opinions, boundaries, joy, pain, depth. And yet, when you try to express yourself now, even gently, a part of you panics. Am I being too much? Am I being dramatic? Am I bothering them? Should I just stay quiet? This is not insecurity. This is memory. Somewhere deep inside, your body remembers what happened the last time you tried to be honest. Healing means challenging that memory, not by forcing yourself to be loud, but by allowing yourself to be real. To say, I need, to say, I feel, to say, that hurt me, to say, this matters to me. Every time you speak truth instead of shrinking, you teach your nervous system something revolutionary. I am allowed to exist without apologizing for it.
Relationships that heal instead of hurt. People often think healing from emotional neglect means learning to love yourself, but that's only half the story. Healing also requires experiencing relationships where your presence actually matters. Not the kind of relationships where you walk on eggshells. Not the ones where you're afraid to ask for anything. Not the ones where you give 90% and receive crumbs. You need relationships where you can speak without rehearsing. You can cry without apologizing. You can disagree without fearing abandonment. You can express needs without feeling guilty. You can exist without performing. These relationships become corrective experiences. They show your inner child something they've never seen before. Connection doesn't have to hurt. But opening up to these relationships is scary because they contradict everything you learned growing up. When someone is kind to you, you question it. When someone sees you, you panic. When someone cares, you freeze. Why? Because your nervous system doesn't trust softness. Softness was the very thing missing in childhood, and now it feels unfamiliar, suspicious, even threatening. But this is where healing begins. Not by forcing trust, but by allowing small doses of safety. A friend who listens, a partner who checks in, a therapist who understands, a stranger who offers kindness without expecting anything. Every moment of genuine connection rewrites a memory inside you. Maybe love isn't something I have to earn. Maybe I'm worthy of it just by being here. Reparenting. Becoming the safe person you never had. Reparenting is not about pretending your childhood hurt. It's about giving yourself now what you desperately needed then. It sounds simple. Be kind to yourself. Validate your emotions. Comfort your inner child. But for emotionally neglected adults, this is hard because you were never shown how. Your parents may have taught you discipline. They may have taught you responsibility. They may have taught you structure. But they didn't teach you softness, or emotional safety, or comfort, or understanding. So now you must learn to give those things to yourself. When you're sad, you comfort yourself instead of shaming yourself. When you're tired, you rest instead of pushing through. When you're overwhelmed, you soothe instead of criticizing. When you're joyful, you let yourself feel it instead of shrinking. When you're hurt, you acknowledge it instead of burying it. Reparenting isn't about fixing the past. It's about changing the future. It's about becoming someone your inner child finally feels safe with. Someone who says, you don't have to be strong all the time. You don't have to hide anymore. I'm here now. I'm listening. You matter, always. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, that abandoned part of you begins to come back to life.
Grieving the childhood you didn't have. Healing emotional neglect often requires a kind of grief people rarely talk about. A grief for the comfort you didn't receive, the affection you deserved, the parents you needed but didn't have, the memories that never existed, the version of childhood you should have lived. This grief is confusing because it isn't about what happened, it's about what should have happened. It's a grief without events, without stories, without scenes, just an ache, a missing piece, a quiet sadness for a life you never got to live. Many people don't allow themselves to feel this grief because they think, my childhood wasn't that bad. They did their best. Nothing horrible happened. Other people had it worse. But your pain is not a competition. Your loneliness was real. Your needs were real. Your longing was real. And grieving is not ingratitude. It is acknowledgement. When you finally let yourself grieve, something inside you softens. Something releases. Something breathes. Because grief is not the end. Grief is the beginning of healing. Rebuilding the self you never got to become. Emotional neglect doesn't just take away connection, it takes away identity. When you grow up shaping yourself around other people's comfort, you don't learn who you really are. Your preferences were muted. Your opinions were silenced. Your dreams were quieted. Your needs were ignored. Now, as an adult, you ask yourself, what do I actually like? What do I actually want? What kind of life do I want to build? The answers feel blurry, foggy, out of reach. That's because your childhood didn't give you the space to discover them. But now you get to choose. Healing means exploring yourself with curiosity instead of judgment.
Try new things. Make mistakes. Change your mind. Take up space. Say yes. Say no. Experiment. Become someone you weren't allowed to be. This is not selfishness. This is self-restoration. You are not building a new self. You are uncovering the one who has been waiting underneath.
Why healing feels scary, even when it's good for you. People often think healing from emotional neglect will feel warm and peaceful. But in reality, it often feels like discomfort, uncertainty, vulnerability, fear, emotional exposure, unfamiliar softness. Why? Because the wounds from emotional neglect were created in silence, but healing requires sound. It requires voice, expression, honesty, presence, all the things you learned to avoid. So when you finally begin to feel, a part of you wants to run. When someone cares, a part of you wants to push them away. When love shows up, a part of you wants to shrink. This is not self-sabotage. This is your nervous system trying to protect you from a threat that no longer exists. The fear is old, but the healing is new. And with each small step, you teach your body a truth it never knew. Safety is possible now. Connection is possible now. I am allowed to be held. The life on the other side of emotional neglect. As you heal, something quietly begins to shift. You start noticing your own emotions instead of ignoring them. You set boundaries without apologizing. You speak with more honesty. You choose relationships that nourish instead of drain. You give love without losing yourself. You stop settling for crumbs. You begin to feel alive in your own life, maybe for the first time. And slowly, the loneliness that once felt like your identity becomes something else. A memory, a teacher, a shadow you've outgrown. You begin to experience a kind of connection you never thought was possible, with yourself and with others, not because you became someone new, but because you finally stopped abandoning the person you've always been. You were never too much. You were never too sensitive. You were never hard to love. You were simply a child who needed warmth and didn't receive it. Now you are an adult learning to give yourself that warmth, and that is courageous. That is powerful. That is healing. A final message to the child you once were. To the child who learned to stay quiet, to the child who learned to stay small, to the child who learned to carry everything alone, to the child who cried in silence, to the child who blamed themselves, to the child who never felt seen. You made it. You survived something no one ever acknowledged. You navigated a world without a map. You became your own shelter, your own comfort, your own protector. But now, you don't have to live alone inside yourself anymore. You get to rest. You get to feel. You get to be held. You get to be understood. You get to be seen.
And you get to be loved, not for what you do, not for how quiet you are, not for how strong you pretend to be, but simply because you exist. And that alone makes you deserving of everything you were once denied.
And if you've made it all the way to this point, I want you to hear this. Not as a narrator, not as a stranger on a screen, but as someone speaking directly to the part of you that needed this video the most. You are no longer that invisible child. You are no longer stuck in a home that couldn't hold your feelings. You are no longer trapped in silence, carrying emotions that were never meant to be carried alone. Today, you took a step, a brave, quiet, life-changing step toward understanding yourself. You face truths many people spend their entire lives running from. You opened doors inside you that had been shut for years. And you allowed yourself to feel something you were taught to suppress: your own worth. That is not small. That is not weak. That is not accidental. That is healing. And this journey doesn't end because the video does. It continues every time you choose to listen to yourself. Every time you give yourself compassion. Every time you stop shrinking and allow yourself to exist fully. So if something in this video resonated with you, if it made you feel seen, if it gave words to things you never knew how to describe, please don't keep it to yourself. Someone out there, maybe a friend, maybe a stranger, maybe someone quietly suffering just like you once were, needs this message too. Share this video with them. Leave a like so this message reaches more people. And if you want more deep psychological breakdowns, healing content, and inner child episodes like this, make sure you subscribe. Your journey matters. Your voice matters. Your healing matters more than you've ever been told. And I hope you come back here. I hope you stay connected. Because here, you are not invisible. Here, you are seen. Here, you belong. Thank you for watching. Take care of your younger self. They've been waiting for you for a very, very long time.